It's been announced that the legendary StarCraft 2 website community, Team Liquid, has made their entry into League of Legends, competitive esports League of Legends. Now, this website, this team, who you probably best know from StarCraft 2, originally started as just a StarCraft 1, StarCraft Brood War website. It was originally a team, a European team, and then as a site, it grew into the main coverage hub for the game, which mainly used to be watching the Korean scene, OGN, OSLs. They had NBC Game, MSLs, Pro League. Kesper was involved with all this. Mainly used to be foreigners watching there and talking about the game and talking about Brood War, and it was the hub of Brood War. And then StarCraft 2 came along, it was the main site for that, and then Reddit grew along with it and kind of shared the overall space, I guess you could say, in terms of coverage and community area. And then since then, they've obviously had teams in Dota 2, most famously. They've got Hearthstone players now, and now finally they've moved into League of Legends. And so, before I go, the video is mainly going to be about upper echelon sort of Team Liquid people, editorial people, people who own the company, people like that, etc., and their views on Team Liquid and why this is interesting that they've moved into League of Legends. But I'll start out by just addressing the issue of the fact that, first and foremost, them moving into League of Legends and getting a team is great. It's really good for League of Legends. It means you've got another big organization involved in League of Legends actively putting in money. Because yes, now we've gotten to the point where, okay, the majority of the LCS teams were finally legit organizations. You know, Evil Geniuses, Curse, obviously, in the past. We've got, over in Europe, we've got Gambit, we've got Fnatic. We've got a bunch of legitimate organizations that have some tenure, some history, and have the funds to pay for all this stuff. But actually, in years gone by, it's not that long that you have to go back that you find organizations that really aren't legit. People like Marn, who apparently owed some of his players money, allegedly. People like Velocity, who seem to have had some real issues in terms of how they dealt with things. Over in Europe, we got some organizations that at the lower level, I mean, Copenhagen Wolves famously had an issue where some of their players said they were owed salary from months before or something like that. This is way back in the past with the Danish team. Different organizations in this sense. We obviously had Dragonborns, which you never even heard of again. Some of these were kind of a joke in comparison to the Fanatics of the world, of the TSMs of the world. And crucially, with the leagues expanding to have 10 in each LCS, in EU LCS and LCS, you were going to get a few more scenarios like that, where they would just challenger level sort of organizations, which themselves as organizations, not just their teams. As organizations, they couldn't really fully support a team in the way that people like a CLG or whatever could in terms of resources, etc. So it's great to have a big organization as well getting involved, ensuring that even all 10 of the teams in the leagues, in theory, can all be supported in a legitimate sense. Now then, in terms of what it does for Team Liquid, that's great. Now they've got a very diverse palette as an organization. They've got StarCraft 2, obviously their bread and butter. They've got Dota 2. They've got Hearthstone, and now they've got League of Legends. In theory, they've got all the big esports cover there except CSGO, and CSGO in general, they've never been involved in FPS whatsoever, so I don't really begrudge them not getting involved there, and maybe if CSGO got bigger eventually, one day maybe they would consider it. But regardless, they've got a very nice wide variety on kind of their portfolio there. And crucially, as a team, let's just talk about the team they've acquired, the team that was formerly Curse. Coming into this season, the hype around this team legitimately is that this team might win LCS. I mean, Cloud9 is the favourite, but once you get beyond Cloud9, this is a very legitimate team on paper. So good players that already barely finished fourth, almost finished third place last split, and now you're getting a different mid laner who we don't know how he'll be. I'm not sure about the Phoenix guy yet, but okay, he seems like he has an upside to him, that he may be able to do good things. They've got their all-star level Piglet, AD carry guy, who's very good. If he'd have stayed in Korea, I think he'd have been the best AD carry left there after the other ones left for China and broke up winning lane matchups like Matter, etc. He potentially can be the best mid lane AD carry in the West in terms of players playing in the West. They've got a lot of potential and a lot of strength in this team, and I mean real potential, as in based on real things. That we know what Piglet's capable of. We've seen Quaz's consistent level. We know that I Will Dominate can be a really good jungler in the West. We know that X Special is probably the best North American support. We've seen all these qualities. So as a team, yeah, also very good. And so for Team Liquid, that's great. That means they potentially have a team that can win LCS. They can have a great entry into the scene. This is great. But Also, by the way, if this means Team Liquid is going to embrace League of Legends as a game, maybe it means the content will be front page on some of their sites. Maybe it means they can put more money into paying content creators so they can have good editorial staff that aren't just volunteers. They can actually put money back in the community, and we can build up this aspect. We could have another good site hosting great stuff. I love it when there's more good content, there's more historical articles, more previews, more interviews. It's all great for the scene. But what this video is mainly going to be about, now that I've put the caveat there, put all the good stuff out there, it's mainly going to be about the fact that Team Liquid getting into League of Legends now is, it's like the finest Ardennes pate. It's so rich. You don't want to eat too much. You'll get gout. You'll destroy your liver, mate. It's too rich, this particular group of people in any way becoming involved with League of Legends. Because let me just explain to you what the attitude was like in terms of how it developed and evolved in Team Liquid, the community, the editorial staff, and some of the ownership. That level of I don't really know the owners, so I won't say ownership directly like that, but sort of the people in charge of Team Liquid and behind Team Liquid and informing it, in deciding the philosophy that informed the site. So a lot of them came from Brood War, like I said. And when StarCraft 2 came out in 2010, a lot of the people who were Brood War fans played StarCraft 2 beta, they played StarCraft 2 when it first came out, they watched the first StarCraft 2 tournaments, and a lot of the Brood War people, their response was, this game is shit. Because they were coming from Brood War. So they were meaning it in direct contrast. As just a release RTS of a game, most RTS games aren't that great. They aren't that great for esports, they're just okay, and some of them are fun in a way. So StarCraft 2, in that context, would have been okay. But as a game compared to Brood War and what you're having to come from and leave to go to StarCraft 2, a lot of people thought this game's pretty shit, or it has a lot of problems, or it's kind of boring actually. Like if you watch the first esports tournaments, those first GSL Opens, some of those are fucking terrible, both in terms of like the maps, the units that were overpowered, like players understanding them. It was really just total crap. Meanwhile, Brood War was an incredibly refined, amazing level. I don't think any esports game ever has gotten to the level that Brood War did at its peak. So understandably, a lot of people's attitude was like that. So the editorial staff and the people who run Team Liquid and a lot of the community aspect that were moving over to StarCraft 2, rather than just say like, nah, you got a point, it's kind of shit, like, yeah, it's not that good right now, yeah, it's kind of weak actually. They took on the attitude instead of like, no, it's a good game with potential, and you know what? You guys are just nostalgic and you're stuck in the past. You know what? Not only are you stuck in the past, but this is the future, man. This is the future of esports, and you should support it, or you at least shouldn't ever make comments that like kind of negative like that. You should like, in fact, the tone of the editorial aspect in the admins was sort of like, we don't really want that kind of discussion. Like you can have your threads where you discuss it, but discuss it in like a constructive criticism manner. And we don't want like flaming about it. And we don't want like people getting upset. And you know what? Don't go on and on about the fact that Brood War is better and that you don't like StarCraft 2. Like StarCraft 2 is what we're all about now. It's the site, it's the future. It's going to be about StarCraft 2. And then they gave up on Brood War content, even though there was still a couple of years of Brood War left that were going to be at elite level, really world-class level. Suddenly the final edits and stuff, those guys had moved over to StarCraft 2. They didn't give a fuck about Brood War. They never wrote anything about some of the great aspects of like Flash's runs there. Those final edits just stopped it. To me, they were one of the most compelling, best parts of the Team Liquid site. They were awesome from like 2007, 2008. Just amazing content. So, okay, they were these sort of people who went with the angle of like, don't be elitist, don't say that, like, this is a good game, it's the future, like, move with the times, go with the flow, man, adapt to what's happening. That's all great. So that's what their opinion was. Okay, keep that in mind there. Remember how they treated the Brood War people and how they wanted you to react to StarCraft 2. Well, along comes League of Legends. About a year and a half after that, because StarCraft 2 came out and I think it was like the second half of 2010. About a year and a half later, it was in early 2012 when League of Legends really got kicked off. Because 2011, it had a bunch of tournaments, it was building up. But 2012 was when the guys from, I think that was the year where, it was actually sort of the end of 2011, when the IEM circuit started to kick in for League of Legends. At the time, IEM was the premier circuit in Western esports. And crucially, after the 2011 season, they'd said, right, next season League of Legends is going to be a main game for us, and it's going to be like one of our primary games, okay? So the switch had been made from, I think it was Quake that went out, and they went into League of Legends like this. And so League of Legends started to blow up, and it was becoming huge, not only as a popular casual game, but as an esport. It was getting bigger and bigger. It was breaking all these records. And understandably, a lot of old esports people from games like Quake, Counter-Strike, StarCraft had the opinion, like, this is a shit game. It's for noobs. It's like Babby's first MOBA game. It's not even as good as Dota. Like, oh, this is just crap. That's not even real esports. All this sort of stuff. And by the way, I'm a pretty elitist guy myself, so actually, yeah, I didn't think League of Legends is good. By the way, I also think StarCraft 2 is total shit, but I didn't think it was good either. But in the same way they allowed StarCraft 2 to exist, yeah, whatever. I allow League of Legends to exist, Dota, Hearthstone, whatever. It's not my shit, but I also don't pretend like it's awesome just because it's the future. But these same guys who were like, nah, don't be elitist about Brood War. Oh, StarCraft 2's the future. Move with the future. Like, don't you love esports? Don't you want esports to grow and get bigger? So along came League of Legends, which was now took up the banner from StarCraft 2, and it was now the flag bearer for esports in the West. And it was going to take esports to the next level. It was the bigger one. It was getting bigger numbers. There was even crossover. Some people had come into League of Legends to find out about esports. Some of them might go into StarCraft 2. They might get involved there as well. They might enjoy both games. They might find out about another game on the side. There was all this good things coming from League of Legends esports. So what was the attitude, do you think, of these people I described at Team Liquid in their community, in the editorial stuff above? Well, it was, on one level, I'd say it was condescending. It was kind of like, oh, League of Legends, haha, are you involved in that? You must only be involved in that for money or because you're popularist or you're a pleb or you just don't care about good games like StarCraft 2 is a man's game. You're like, it was rude, like I described, kind of like that. Like, they refused to put stuff on their front page or on their site or even have like a proper section. They just had like a section that was like an offshoot, in the same way they had a section for like sports, of like boxing or whatever, or just stuff on the side, like a soccer thread or something. That's like what the League of Legends section was like. Meanwhile, Brood War and StarCraft 2 had their own proper sections. In terms of, they were dismissive. The idea that, like, yes, this is only a game for the people, a lot of people play it. Okay, that's the only reason it's big, and it's only big because Riot puts money in it. Dismissive as a legit esports game, as something that people want to play, want to watch, want to support, and want to enjoy as a real legitimate esport, a proper sport. Some of them, part of the reason they did that is they said they preferred Dota 2 when that game came out. They were like, oh, Dota 2 is more skillful, more mechanical. You've heard all these arguments a million times. And so the problem with this whole scenario was, League of Legends did have this little offshoot site, and that site built up some great content. Had a lot of people who were just volunteer workers, guys who were just creating threads and not even getting proper, and they were never front paged on their stuff. They never had proper attention given to them, despite the fact they were doing all this great content. So you'd think if you're getting great content, you're building it up. League of Legends as a game is becoming quite legit. No doubt people who even play StarCraft 2 for fun, a lot of them play it for fun on the side. Why not make it a legit part of your site? Well, first of all, there's the condescending attitude there that they always thought, like, well, we don't support League of Legends. We don't like League of Legends. You know what? We'll tolerate it, but it's not for us. Secondly, there was this ridiculous fear where, and I hate it when people pander to the crowd, where they feared that some of their user base, this was the sense I got that I'm speculating about, they feared that some of their user base in StarCraft 2 were like so hardcore and so against League of Legends that it would like frighten them off, or it would piss them off, or they'd be like, oh, I'm done with this site if it's going to support League of Legends. League of Legends is killing esports and it's killing StarCraft 2. And this sort of insecurity and fear-mongering, well, not fear-mongering, but fear amongst the group that expressed itself in StarCraft 2 fans, the way they hated League of Legends and were quite jealous in some ways, came out in terms of how the Team Liquid people seem to actually treat the content on their own site, the efforts of people contributing to them, volunteers, guys doing great work, guys like Fion. He was involved primarily coming from StarCraft 2 on their site over into League of Legends, doing the early stuff, doing some really good stuff. Now, how rich is that attitude? To have been so douchey about the Brood Watch StarCraft 2 thing and make it out as a you're like a piece of shit, or there's something wrong with you that you can't just let it go and let live and let people enjoy it. You know what? This is the new thing. Embrace it. Follow esports. Don't you love esports? And now you come into League of Legends and suddenly they're the ones who are like, no, I don't like that. And they're the ones who suddenly have taken on their own attitude. How ironic. They're doing the exact same thing themselves. The same thing they would have admonished or tried to chastise you to be like the bigger man and be a better and follow esports and all that. The exact same attitude transferred over. And by the way, I come from Brood War. So to me, StarCraft 2 is shit compared to Brood War. So go one way or the other. Either go, yeah, StarCraft 2 shit compared to Brood War. So is League of Legends. And by the way, within the context of Brood War, which I think is the best game ever, League of Legends is shit, just like StarCraft 2 is shit. And actually, the difference between those two, like I would say StarCraft 2 in some senses is better. It's negligible compared to the difference between both of them and Brood War. That's a massive gap. StarCraft 2 to League of Legends is like that gap. In terms of Dota 2, likewise, the gap between Brood War and Dota 2 is so massive that the difference between Dota 2 and League of Legends is so minimal, like it's not even worth getting, I prefer it, like you're the fucking, like you're talking about classical music and he's like a fan of like the most basic, like 2 chords punk music by people who can't even play the instruments. It's not that difference whatsoever. Instead, it's more like he likes fucking Fugazi and then this guy likes like Green Day or whatever. The difference isn't that ridiculously huge. And so, even more rich, the same people who sort of skipped League of Legends, like went from Brood War to StarCraft 2, then they skipped League of Legends and were like, I don't like that shit. Then the same editorial staff and ownership people came along later and were like, I love Hearthstone. I play it on my fucking iPad in the coffee shop, drinking my pumpkin spice latte. Like, are you fucking kidding me right now? Hearthstone? You think Hearthstone's a better esports game than League of Legends? You're out of your fucking mind, mate. And that's so ridiculously plebeian as an esports game, which again, to me, they're all shit compared to the best ones. But whatever. It's not even worth arguing over what's better out of these two games. The idea that you're going to say that Hearthstone's like better, or somehow that's acceptable as a fun game, and then to have an esports side, oh, I like it as a fun game, so of course it can have an esports side. Yet you were shitting on League of Legends and acting just like a fucking twat about it, and even worse, after you yourself had admonished people about doing that to StarCraft 2. How bloody rich is this? Like, what a joke this whole thing is. And so, as a result of this, it shows me that not only were these people who, I mean, listen, there's got to be something wrong with you in terms of, like, I don't know, some sort of social aspect or something, some kind of insecurity in yourself that you would behave in these two almost opposing ways, using the same logic on different directions as it suits you, and not consistent or coherent. But even worse, it shows me that you didn't understand the function of League of Legends. Because one of the ways I very quickly got over thinking, oh, League of Legends is shit, I don't want to be involved in it, was actually through just seeing the people I knew who played it and why they played it and talking to them about it and then playing it myself. And what I realized was, first of all, League of Legends always should have been acceptable just as a fun game. In the same way as I said StarCraft 2 is acceptable just as another RTS released, and then if it builds up its own following, fine, that's something independent. But if you were forcing us from Brood War here, or you're saying it's as good as Brood War, or don't pretend Brood War's better, or be like that, now that I've got a problem with that. But as a game, the function of League of Legends was to be a fun game. It was a casual game. Like, the way I really got into League of Legends at first was actually that, first of all, I had relatives and friends who played it, but then more crucially, I knew CS pros who were hardcore in CS 1.6, and they were super good pros. And what they would do is, they would play CS all day for their job and practice, but then in their downtime afterwards, for fun, and I knew some StarCraft 2 pros as well, for fun, then they'd play the League of Legends. Then they'd play a bit of solo queue, or they'd play some normal games with their friends. And it was a way to let off some steam. It wasn't as hardcore and intensive as playing like 1v1 games in StarCraft 2, where you get crushed on the ladder, or playing customs and getting wrecked by some really good guy. It wasn't as hardcore as having to do strats that are like dry running in a server, or running one thing over and over in a 5v5 strat in your team. You was just having some fun, just playing with some champions, messing around, playing a bit of solo queue. So as a result, just as a fun game, it always should have been understood that it had a function like this. And then once you have a big enough fun game and there's money getting put in the esport, now the esports side exists. Now here's the part that falls down completely about that elitist attitude of those other people before. The way they were elitist was so ridiculous. They wrote off the whole game and the whole area, which is something I've never done about StarCraft 2, actually, by the way. As a game, I think StarCraft 2 is shit compared to Brood War. But someone like MVP, who won by just mastering the game of knowing when to do something and being decisive with it, and having such a versatile skill set that you could use any tool in the box to win, and then win, and not only that, but dominate and be an incredible player. Or Nesty, this player who's had didn't even have that good physical skills, but just had genius decision making and almost toyed with people. It's like you existed in his mind, and that's where the game was going on. He almost reminded me of like Ender in the where he's playing that game in his mind inside Ender's game, where it's like that computer game. It reminded me of that almost, the way Nesty played the game. It was so brilliant. And so I could always appreciate the greatest players, these greatest Koreans, that they're doing something special. What they're doing is great, and there is some value to that, even if I don't like the game as a medium. And I definitely wouldn't have pretended that those people, MVP and Nesty, doing that godlike stuff, were somehow better than in my game, Brood War, that I preferred, than like just some foreign pros playing some little cup somehow. I wouldn't pretend that it was better than that. And yet that's almost the equivalent of what these people were doing in League of Legends by dismissing it. Because the key thing about all games is, don't just look at the average level and go, oh, it's an esport, I don't care about that. Go to the highest level play and watch a bit of it and try and understand. And if you go to the highest level of Korean League of Legends, from 2012 onwards, you could already see amazing players. Reaper, this guy, incredible shot caller, carrying from the top lane, but then also shot calling from that position and reading the opponents, having crazy picks. Or you think about Mad Life. This guy had the most incredible mechanics and playmaking and just doing things that were impossible from that position. The highest level was amazing. And just as I think Brood War's a much better game, well, let's use the StarCraft 2 example. People from StarCraft 2 who dismissed the League of Legends esports as not a real esport. I'll tell you what, mate, Mad Life in his level, or Reaper in his level, in League of Legends, this game you consider inferior, was much, much better and more skilled and more intensive than fucking like Ret or some like okay level top European pro, who in the context of Koreans was nobody, someone like Ret or like Mana, these guys playing their games and doing like a top 4 in a tournament or something, that wasn't as good or as much value or merit within the context of esports as what these incredible Koreans were doing at the top level of League of Legends. That's just the way it is, mate. I've seen all these games, and that's my assessment of it. That's why I think I can get into most games as long as the top level is really expanded and people are going hardcore, and crucially if there's Koreans or there's Chinese people who just dedicate their lives and their skills and their discipline for the game is so much more that they can elevate it. That's the crucial thing. They elevate the game. The game still might not be that great, but they elevate it with their play. So they never understood this, it seemed, these people, at least at that point in time. So what's funny is, yeah, it's rich. This video's kind of like told you so, or like, haha, look at you. You thought you were so cool and you had all the answers, but you fucked up twice here, and now you've had to come back on it full circle on yourself, and now suddenly be the guy who's embracing it as well, because it's such a big game, and it just makes sense logically from a business sense to be involved in this game, because the way LCS works and the viewership and the way fan bases work and the merchandising, it just makes sense, and also to have a more diverse kind of portfolio of teams. It makes sense. Now then, by waiting this long, there's also a haha told you so in terms of like your resistance to this was stupid in the sense that it's cost you. Like you could have gotten involved in the first 2 splits in NA and gotten a good team and kind of done what you did with the StarCraft 2 thing. Take a winger on people, take a gamble on people who seem decent, and then you take a gamble and maybe they go somewhere. So maybe you could have got like the team that was Vulcan or the team that became Cloud9, and some of these teams became like top 3 or won their region. You could have got them at almost nothing. The investment at that point in terms of salary and stuff was very, very low. So the equivalent of getting, in the end, what you'd have gotten would have been paying like pennies on the dollar to get a top level team that might have gone to Worlds that year. Instead, now you've got a top level team in the West and a team that can potentially win LCS, but you've paid almost the max for it. That guy Liquid did a great job on that deal, as far as I can tell of what's going on with like giving up half a team Liquid or something. This guy's gotten the max out of it. So instead you've given away half the farm, when instead you could have just used a couple of your profits to pay a little amount and gamble and get this incredible thing, get a bunch of studs in the I don't even know what you call the place you keep horses. The horse shed. There we go. You could have done that. Instead, you fucked it up. Now, in terms of community, you could, in all the years from 2012 onwards, if you embraced it properly, it's true, Reddit was the main area for League of Legends. But because of having this community of writers, there would have been quite a healthy community on Team Liquid already. Instead of having to build one now or open it up now, it would have already existed. And by now, it would be huge. Now you'd have one of the most sizable non-Reddit user bases of people discussing and actually talking high level about matches outside of Reddit. Because what else is there aside from Reddit? Like general discussion? Nobody goes there for in-depth discussion. GG Chronicle, that was only really the super hardcore people. And lastly, you could have had one of the best cadres of writers in the whole scene. You already had people who were birthed within that, who were really passionate about Team Liquid and didn't want to leave until things were literally ridiculous in terms of what they were getting and how they were being neglected and ignored and treated kind of like, as League of Legends as a game was, they were kind of treated as like the red-headed stepchildren of the editorial staff and the site and just put off in a corner and forget about them. It's like, here's the stuff up front, Dota 2, StarCraft 2, put them over to one side. I don't want to look at them, don't look at them, like... It was just ridiculous, especially as now you've had to sort of eat a bit of humble pie, come back around, and now we're here in League of Legends. So it's great. Welcome to League of Legends. It's a great team you've picked up. It's nice to have you here. It's good to be in the community. But don't be arseholes, because you have shown sort of a penchant for that sort of behaviour in the past. And also, haha, I told you so, and all that sort of good stuff. Because I know some of these people involved, and they act a little bit douchey when it's other people who make the mistake or do something silly or, oh, I knew that was wrong. Well, now you got to taste your own medicine.